So I'm excited to introduce Hans-Georg Höllerer from BlueSeafood here in Berlin, Germany, to our series on young bioeconomy entrepreneurs. Hans is a part of the leadership team at BlueSeafood and part of the head of the business development and communications and operations there. So welcome, Hans. It's nice to talk to you today, and I'm excited to ask you a few questions. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's great talking to you.
Great. So I'll get started. I've got a few just short questions for you, a little bit about the idea behind BlueSeafood and also kind of your personal journey and how you came about to working in the space of the bioeconomy and maybe your educational journey as well. So to start off, what is BlueSeafood's business idea in the circular bioeconomy?
Yeah, so many of us love seafood, right? It's tasty, it's healthy, but we all know that our oceans are heavily overfished, and the fish that we eat contain more and more heavy metals and microplastics, stuff that you really don't want to have in your body. And also, we're kind of killing trillions of animals, which is not very ethical either. So there's a few alternatives, and one of them is cultivating seafood directly from cells. And that's what we do. That means we take a one-time biopsy from an animal, and then we create a so-called immortalized cell line, which you can imagine like something like a sourdough starter, something you can use over and over again without having to go back to the animal ever. And these cells are then fed with all the nutrients that they would get inside the fish, everything they need in order to grow and proliferate. And then we take the cells that are grown in a controlled environment, a fermenter, and depending on the product, we would either mix them with plant-based protein to make things like fish sticks or fish balls, or just take the pure cell mass and put it on scaffolds to create structured products like sashimi or fish fillet, which are, of course, a bit more complex and complicated to produce than the fish fingers and fish balls, which we're starting with.
Okay, very interesting, very innovative. What inspired you in the first place to get into this line of work?
It's actually a good story. My grandmother had a fish shop, which I spent a lot of time in as a child. So I grew up loving seafood, but also being very close to these animals, because it was one of these old-fashioned fish shops where you still have big tanks. You could actually point and choose the fish that you wanted, and then it would be slaughtered and sold to you. But then if you love the animal and you're fascinated by it, but also you love the food, you got kind of a dilemma, which is nicely solved by cultivated seafood, where you get the real deal. You get the actual fish. It tastes like the original, has the same nutritional profile, but you don't have to kill animals for it. And I think, like many of us, I'm thinking about how to leave the planet just a little better than we found it. And yeah, through that, I found a tiny area where I hopefully can make my mark.
Great. And out of curiosity, what would a typical working day look like for you at BlueSeafood? I mean, is it kind of got the startup energy? I can imagine maybe it's grown a bit, but what does your day look like?
Yeah, it's definitely got the startup energy, which you can also call chaos sometimes. Yeah, there's no typical day right now. As you said, I lead on communications and marketing, which tends to be very fast paced. There's things that come out and journalists that come in with requests. So there's a lot of on demand ad hoc stuff on the communication side, also because this is just a topic that gets people excited, but there's also some opposition. So there's also always something to deal with on the communication side. And then also we're in fundraising right now, which is a vital part of every startup's life, because right now we're still not selling any product. That means a lot of investor conversations, a lot of detailed questions to be answered for them. It's a very cumbersome process. It's worth it, but you always have to knock on a lot of doors until you really sell your story. And it is a lengthy process that we're going through. And otherwise, I'm on the business side, so I can work remotely, maybe 2/3 of the time, which is nice. So I can even work from, say, the mountains if I wanted to. But I do try to be in the lab every 2 to 3 weeks. First of all, because it's nice to see the people, and it's nice to see the science and the R&D actually going on in the lab. But it's also important to be connected to what's happening in the team and to what our scientists are talking about. So really no typical work day at this point, but that's the deal. I really enjoy it. And I think we'll get to talk about what's important with this style of working, that you set your own boundaries and things. But right now it's how my days are, and I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine it's pretty diverse.
Yeah.
So what has been your study and career path? I mean, how did you end up in this space? I think you come from a kind of economics or business background, and we've talked to other entrepreneurs that actually got masters in bioeconomy, but there's so many different ways to end up in this space. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got here.
Yeah, so I've kind of always been a wanderer between the worlds. It's not that with 18 I said, hey, I want to cultivate fish one day, and that's the path I'm gonna go on. So I went to Nicaragua for a year after my high school for civil service, which was very enriching. Then I studied geography and political science in my bachelor's, did a master's in economics. So quite broad studies that I did during these years. And then I joined a management consultancy, the Boston Consulting Group, for 3.5 years. And yeah, basically learned how you run a company, and how you come up with a good strategy, especially for bigger companies, and especially in pharma and biotech, because I was always fascinated, even while coming from a business side, by how our world kind of works, how the tiny processes in our bodies and in our world, how they make up the world we live in. And but I was always interested to see that from a business side, to maybe translate scientific findings into the real world. So I'd never been really the specialist to go super deep, but I was always fascinated to understand it to a certain degree. And then I joined the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for another 2.5 years, because I felt I wanted to work on really big questions, like I'm sure many of us and you want. So they work on development aid, mostly fighting infectious diseases like tuberculosis, malaria, HIV, and others. And they invest in areas that others don't want to invest in or can't invest in because it's too risky for them, because there's no business case. So really a fascinating organization. And I even got to spend time with Bill Gates and meet a lot of political hotshots. And it was just interesting to be around these people and to see how policy is shaped in our world. And yeah, I was always a bit far away from the impact of my work, though, because you're far away not only geographically but also time-wise from that child that gets immunized against polio in 5 years in rural Pakistan. And that's why I chose to become an entrepreneur, to be closer to what I do, to see the effect of my decisions, be they right or be they wrong, and yeah, to really do something that's truly entrepreneurial. And then my paths crossed with Simon and Sebastian, two co-founders of BluuSeafood, and I joined beginning of this year.
Okay, great. Yeah, so different ways to come to where you are. Quite interesting. Health, business, all of it kind of coming together. What would you say though is one of the biggest challenges for a young sustainable entrepreneur?
Yeah, thanks for calling me young. I appreciate it. I think everyone has probably their own challenges and things to overcome, but for me, it's certainly the work-life balance. I think if you're ambitious, or maybe tend to be one of these insecure overachievers who never feels like they've done enough, it can be self-destructive at a certain point. And I think that's what I learned, and many of my friends also learned over the last years. you need to set boundaries for yourself, especially as an entrepreneur, where you feel all the weight and all the responsibilities on your shoulders to make this company thrive and to make it successful. And there will be super tough times where you're at the brink of going down, and even in these situations, you kind of need to set these boundaries and to protect some time for your family, your friends, or just for yourself, and not think about work day and night. And I think that's one of the most important learnings for myself. I think it's a process over the years, and everyone has to like find their own tools, be it meditation or be it therapy or talking to people, whatever. But I think it's something you need to be aware of. I sometimes say, like, being in a startup, it's like doing competitive sports. And if you do competitive sports, you also have to stretch, you have to get massages, you have to rest. So you need to take good care of yourself. Otherwise, you can't remain competitive and you can't remain good at what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that flows in nicely to our last question, which is, what kind of advice do you have for students entering the world of bioeconomy? If you can name a few things that you might want to tell people before they enter this world.
Yeah. Again, I think it's a personal thing. For me, first of all, if you're thinking about it, you should do it. I mean, you should think about what holds you back. And if it's only the fear of others laughing about you or failing, or a business risk that you're taking, I think go for it, right? And then, because these risks that you take, are they real risks? You can always go back to a stable job. You can always go back to another type of career, especially in these times where it's so easy to switch from one career path to another. So I think trying out things and trying out being an entrepreneur for half a year, it's not risky at all, actually. And if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. It's fine. But I think, I don't know, if I think back, I mostly regret not doing things. I rarely regret actually trying things out. I think about it for a minute or two, but then try it out. And then I think what helped me with the whole startup game and entrepreneurial game is to see it as a bit of a game in the end. See it in a playful way. See it with a certain level of sportswomanship. It will become quite serious anyhow, but you should also try to enjoy it and to accept that sometimes you lose, sometimes you win. It goes on. I think this metaphor, you can be stretched quite a lot. There's a team that you play with and many other things, but see it in a playful way if possible, because it's not that serious in the end. Yeah, we're all trying to do something that's meaningful and that's fun, and other people are doing that too. So yeah, try to approach it with a certain lightness. I think that's what I'm trying to suggest.
Very helpful advice. Thank you for that. Yeah, so those are all of our questions. You've given us a lot to think about, a lot to excite, I think, people about entering this world. It's very vast, and there's a lot of ways to be involved and a lot of different disciplines that can be put to use. So thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. You've actually given me a lot to think about with these great questions. So it's been great fun. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.